ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for us to have this LiFE conference taking off today. This idea was there in our minds for quite some time in terms of giving a substantive focus on G20 presidency of India, and amid academics, people who are practitioners and closely engaged in terms of how we look at the substantive part of the G20 outcome adequately addressed and trying to bring forward issues which require further detailed analysis for taking them forward to next presidencies and also turning them into action. So how do we take the principles that we have come out with? And as you know, in this conference, RIS has chosen the idea of lifestyle for sustainable development, or lifestyle for environment, as Prime Minister called it. And this is idea, something is that is there with us for some time. We were very keen to do that with the University Connect, and University Connect is another major program where we could reach out to several partners in 101 universities across the country. Now, RIS has decided to have the University Connect centers in different universities to deepen the work that India has proposed through high-level principles. And there are 4 different areas where India has thought of doing it. We have Sherpa himself today with us. I would very much like to request him to guide us today in terms of how academics can take forward the work that he could accomplish, not only through several rounds of discussions, negotiations, but also a huge footprint that is there. Just this evening, I have come back from Cape Town, where we did the handing over of T20 presidency to Brazil. And everybody was quite impressed in terms of how India has delivered, and the fact that we could come out with not only a consensus document, but something that has given out substantively a full spectrum of issues on all different areas that are there. LiFE certainly stands out there. I'm extremely grateful to Excellency Madam Ambassador and the rest rep for UNDP today to join us here and take the idea forward. My colleagues, Mr. Tadas and Hirat, they have worked on a 5-minute video which captures the essence of the conference that is there. And I would very much like to request everyone to pay some attention on this video, and then we would go forward. We can have the video now. Thank you.
This story began long before us. And it will continue long after us. But for now, this story is ours to shape. This is the story of LiFE. For billions of years, LiFE has been thriving, teeming with diversity, bursting with intelligence. But for the first time in history, we are living through a breakdown of the ecosystems on which all life depends. Our international order is faltering, ravaged by conflict, corruption, and climate change. And yet, these challenges are symptoms of one core problem: our economic systems. The same systems that have improved standards of living for billions of people and inspired unprecedented innovation now threaten our common future. Each day is bringing our world closer to collapse. But together, we have the power to change this story. From our current reality, we can grow a new economy, a global life support system. The green shoots of this new life economy are already here. Farmers are developing smart ways to grow food sustainably for a population set to reach 10 billion by 2050. Coastal communities are developing new forms of aquaculture to draw down carbon and heal our planet. We have begun harnessing the power of the sea to create sustainable energy and produce nutritious food. Groundbreaking designers are working with natural materials and biomimicry to create products that give back more than they take from people and our planet. Women-led enterprises are demonstrating holistic solutions to advance well-being, reinvent finance, and build resilience by working for the benefit of all. From the foothills of the Himalayas to the rainforests of the Amazon, indigenous communities have long practiced stewardship as guardians of the planet, serving as part of nature, living in harmony with all forms of life. Now, we have the opportunity to accelerate all of these practices. That's why this summit is so important. Hence, the development of a LiFE economy. For the first time, the G20 has arrived at a new global consensus with the introduction of Varanasi Principles on Lifestyles for Sustainable Development, which express a universal truth that the intractable challenges we face, climate change, extinction, and growing inequality, can only be addressed by changing the system which created them. To accelerate the growth of LiFE economies, we need new rules, new financial models, and new business structures which are built for the benefit of all people and our planet. We need new metrics that reflect quality of life. We need inclusive ways of governing society. We need economic policies that leave no one behind. And we must ensure that our technologies do not create more problems than they seek to solve. The good news is, we already have decades of innovation that can be harnessed to get us there. We have tens of millions of for-benefit businesses designed this way, solving problems around the world. And we know that billions of people want to align their values with what they buy, with trillions of dollars already available in ethical capital waiting to be unleashed. To realize this potential, we need to overcome the biggest challenges currently preventing LiFE economies from realizing their full potential. Countries have already started this process. Every member of the G20 has passed laws recognizing parts of the LiFE economy. Many have introduced rules to protect and restore our air, water, and land resources and reverse the loss of biodiversity. That's why we are here. Together, we can move from principles to action. We can build shared understanding and improve policy coherence, creating the life-changing solutions we so urgently need to grow LiFE economies around the world. The LiFE economy is blossoming within each of us, and we are here to support its growth. As one Earth, one family, for one future. Let's do it together.
Thank you. Thanks for your attention. Friends and colleagues, it's a great pleasure for us to take forward the idea of LiFE. And as I said in the beginning, we are trying to connect it with economy. So the conference focus is on LiFE economy. And as I also mentioned, the high-level principles that we adopted in Varanasi for lifestyle for sustainable development. In this conference, we are trying to cover some of these facets which Indonesian presidency laid out so very well, and now Brazil has already initiated broad agenda in terms of sustainability. Here in this conference, we are trying to take the idea forward in terms of SCP, the sustainable consumption and production, how we would address the challenge of sustainable food systems, climate and biodiversity, integrated and holistic health systems, and women-led development. So all have fallen very well within the dimension of LiFE economy, as this video captured. The idea is in terms of identifying opportunities for harnessing LiFE economy and taking it forward, both in terms of reforming the nature of development finance and connecting that with the ethics, bringing it forward in terms of how access to finance is as important as sustainability of environment and biodiversity. And we are trying to bring in issues that are related to social enterprises, scaling up them and trying to bring forward how the G20 and issues which are identified in India's New Delhi Leaders Declaration are taken forward in terms of various facets of life economy. And in total, there are these broad 5 facets that we have identified. As I said, SCP is first. Second is to bring forward its connect with the ethics and the principles of life that are important. The third is in terms of policy regulations and going beyond GDP, as Prime Minister said, bringing in human-centric development and trying to capture well-being. So there is a specific session on new measures and governance principles that are there. So this way, the conference captures a large canvas, and we are planning to come out with a huge number of conferences which are going to focus on each of these facets over next 1 year. With Brazilian T20 team, we had detailed discussions in terms of how we are going to go forward. Fortunately, the OECD Sherpa and Federico is here from the OECD Development Center. We are trying to take this idea forward in partnership. The T20 had a specific task force, as Sherpa is aware, where we focused on life economy. And this group had around 22 co-chairs. Sita Prabhu is here among the co-chairs, and this group has made contribution in terms of how that idea is to be accomplished. A volume has emerged from T20, which we would later request Sherpa to launch. There is also our idea to partner with UNICEF and take this concept forward in terms of how this dimension of development can be addressed at multiple levels. And that requires, again, some effort in terms of rehashing the SDG indicators. And during his days in NITI, Sherpa had made efforts in terms of sharpening the focus through several hundreds of indicators to 47 that he had brought them down to. And our idea would be to bring some of these whenever there is reconsideration in terms of the derailing that we have seen with SDGs. So revival of that would be extremely important. Several of you have traveled from long distances. I'm extremely grateful to each one of you who have traveled long distances and have come for this conference on a rather short notice. People have also traveled within the country. I'm extremely thankful to all of you for your participation, and have now great pleasure in inviting Her Excellency Madam Ambassador from Republic of Indonesia here. Madam, you have the floor.
G20 Sherpa, Honorable Amitabh Khan, DG of RIS, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, Resident Representative UNDP India, Ms. Isabella Chan, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Namaskar, good evening. It is with great pleasure for me to read the remarks of His Excellency Luhut Binsar Panjaitan, Coordinating Minister for Maritime Affairs and Investment, the Republic of Indonesia, as the co-host of this important summit. Excellencies, honorable speakers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed an honor to be a co-host of the Global Summit of Life Economy entitled From Principles to Actions with the Ministry of External Affairs of India and RIS. And I extend a warmest welcome to all to this remarkable event. I would like to congratulate India once again on its very successful G20 presidency and summit held in September, and the successful delivery of G20 New Delhi Leaders Declaration. India's G20 presidency, with its theme of One Earth, One Family, One Future, embodies the spirit and urgency of the need for global cooperation and an inclusive economic model that support our common sustainable future in this one planet Earth we call home. The emphasis of lifestyle for environment, LiFE, is an important step towards an agenda of sustainable development, climate change, and climate justice. These actions would restore planetary balance and so are the ultimate victory over the challenges that we face today. Growing the LiFE economy will accelerate the green transition and usher in people-centered, inclusive, and sustainable development. It will contribute to the effective implementation of sustainable development through a systems approach, improving policy coherence, and creating synergies to address the misalignment of finance with the SDGs. The LiFE economy is thus about enabling, strengthening development and growth that benefit all people and the planet, as well as an alignment of the private sector with the sustainable management of natural resources and social capital. To tackle the scale, urgency, and complexity of today's global problems and to achieve our collective ambition of the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, we need a shift in values, mindset, and action on the part of all individuals, one by one. All of us must change our attitudes towards delivering a sustainable future. The LiFE economy encompasses all stakeholders. For businesses, this means prioritizing social and environmental benefit and the well-being of all stakeholders. On finance, prioritizes social and environmental stewardship. Households, individuals, communities that adjust their consumption to conserve natural resources, and an ecosystem including policy and regulation that enables these objectives. In short, the LiFE economy is a model for growth and development that represents an important step towards a more coherent agenda of sustainable development, climate action, and a just transition. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me share with you Indonesia's ambitions around the theme of LiFE economy. Indonesia has instituted a number of policies and initiatives supporting the green transition of its key economic sectors in sustainable infrastructure, energy transition, sustainable fisheries and ocean economy, ecotourism, and regenerative agriculture. Today, I would like to highlight the Bali Transformation Roadmap and the G20 Bali Global Blended Finance Alliance. President Joko Widodo launched the New Era Bali Kerti Roadmap, which outlines the economic roadmap to transform Bali into a green, resilient, and prosperous economic zone. The New Era Bali Kerti Roadmap is a prototype of the LiFE economy. The roadmap sets out a model to attract and nurture leading global and local enterprises in the areas of health and knowledge, digitization, green and blue economy, sustainable and blended finance, integrated infrastructure, and quality tourism in Bali. The roadmap looks to harness the power of big data and enable collaborative action in areas such as poverty eradication, health, education, scientific innovation, research and development, climate, forests, and oceans. Most importantly, the roadmap will reflect the economic pathways underpinned by the Balinese Trihita Karana philosophy of the harmony between people, nature, and spiritual peace. Bali is the first province in Indonesia to ban single-use plastic since 2019, and Indonesia will start imposing a ban on single-use plastic products by the end of 2029. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, At the G20 Bali Summit last year, Indonesia worked to align the role of blended finance by establishing the G20 Bali Global Blended Finance Alliance that was included in the G20 Bali Leaders Declaration. We thank India for your support at G20 Bali and for including blended finance in the G20 Delhi Declaration. The G20 Bali Global Blended Finance Alliance is envisioned to serve as a global community of support to accelerate investment in climate action and sustainable development. The G20 Bali Global Blended Finance Alliance includes partnership between stakeholders and interested parties, government, philanthropic, and private investors to promote the use of development and philanthropic finance to incentivize private investment for targeted high-impact climate and SDG solutions. It will support development of G20 blended finance principles to scale and replicate blended finance instruments to reduce the cost of sustainable investment for the developing countries, least developed countries, and the small island developing states. These efforts, along with South-South learning and collaboration, will support better outcomes for the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the initiatives is Massive Inclusive Impact MSMEs to help bridge financing gaps of MSMEs. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, there is much that we can learn from India and from each other on LiFE economy framework, and we look forward to engaging with you, partnering with others to achieve the LiFE economy for a better and more sustainable world. I wish you every success in this global summit on LiFE economy and look forward to collaborating further in the 2024 G20 summit in Brazil. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Thanks for your remarks. Thanks for bringing forward the relevance, importance, and reference point of blended finance as our collective initiative for mobilizing this. Tomorrow, we have a special session in the morning to explore these complementarities that have emerged from the Indonesian presidency, Indian presidency, and how Brazil is going to take that forward, where Hirat would be speaking. So thanks a lot. Let me now invite Rest Rep for UNDP, Isabella. You have the floor now. Please come.
Her Excellency Ina Krishnamurti, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia and India, Honorable Mr. Kant, G20 Sherpa, Honorable Professor Chaturvedi, and Honorable Mr. Tadal. Shubh Sandhya, Namaste. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here tonight on behalf of UNDP. At the outset, I would like to congratulate India for a highly successful G20 presidency. As the UN Secretary General underlined last week at the virtual G20 summit, India's G20 presidency reminded us that we are one Earth, one family, with one future. And he called all of us, let's act on it. By building consensus around key development issues and promoting exchange of knowledge and ideas, India has demonstrated its global leadership in providing solutions for a world which is plagued by, and I cite again, growing inequalities, climate chaos, conflicts and hunger, as the Secretary General described it last week at the virtual G20 summit. These global uncertainties are slowing down our development efforts. Countries around the world face a critical choice between economic prosperity and environmental sustainability. It is in response to these challenges that the agenda LiFE economy emerges as a pathway for sustainable growth and development. The G20 high-level principles on lifestyles for sustainable development, LiFE, endorsed by the development ministers, mark a significant milestone in global consensus building. These principles call for collective actions to embrace sustainable production and consumption patterns, acknowledging the critical role of circular economy, extended producer responsibility, and resource efficiency in achieving sustainable development. Currently, only 7.2% of used materials are cycled back into our economies after use. At the same time, material consumption has risen by over 65% globally in the past 2 decades. Therefore, our manufacturing processes must be reimagined, not only for efficiency, but with a deep-seated commitment to environmental responsibility. Through efficient and more circular use of just 4 industrial materials, cement, steel, plastics, and aluminum, we can reduce the global greenhouse gases emissions by 40% by 2050. However, we must be mindful that achieving a circular economy demands a collective effort. It seeks a growth that is not just economic, but also enhances well-being, which is environmentally friendly, socially inclusive, and people-centric. Consequently, we need to recognize the centrality of values and ethical norms, for just, equitable, and sustainable economies in future, and actions on lifestyle for sustainable development, meeting the basic needs of all people, both men and women, and especially of people living in vulnerable situations. As proposed in the model of the development based on LiFE principles, in our efforts for LiFE economy, gender equality and empowering women and youth as drivers of change is also paramount. Gender parity in decision-making processes enhances the inclusivity of circular practices, addresses unique needs, and fosters a more sustainable and equitable economy model for all. This shift is integral to driving advancement aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals and the principle leaving no one behind. Ladies and gentlemen, the Global Summit of the LiFE Economy from Principles to Action comes at an important time as world leaders prepare to gather in Dubai next week for COP28. Governments, businesses, and individuals must collaborate in unprecedented ways. It requires bold policies that incentivize sustainability, corporate leaders committed to change, and a society willing to embrace a new way of living. At UNDP, we are working with governments and businesses to leverage circular economy approaches as a powerful tool to meet our climate and development targets. UNDP India has been actively supporting the government of India towards Mission LiFE since its inception. Looking ahead, we continue to work with all partners to ensure that LiFE becomes a key driver for behavioral change towards sustainability. I look forward to the important outcomes emerging from this global summit and assure you UNDP's continued support to make the LiFE economy vision a reality and turn the principles into action. I thank you.
Thanks, Isabella. Let me now invite Sita Prabhu and Arslan here on the dais as I request Sherpa and our other dignitaries to launch the publication. Friends, as I mentioned, Task Force 3 at T20 has made this effort. There are 22 papers that our academics have contributed. Arslan and Sita both have worked in terms of editing this volume and putting these 22 excellent papers together, which we have compiled in form of this publication. And as we handed over the T20 yesterday, this publication is the first one that has come out, apart from the broad guiding principles that T20 stood for. And that publication is already on the website of the T20 Secretariat. This volume is to be published by Springer. At this point, RIS has brought out. So I would request Sherpa to launch it along with the ambassador. Thank you. Thanks a lot. These copies would be made available soon. There is also this plan that I wanted to mention in terms of deepening this research work. And sometimes it happens that things get attention, and then if there is no substantive research network to take the agenda forward, things don't go and they remain confined to a conference or the summit declaration. We have deliberated upon this issue for some time, and with help of Mr. Tadas, Hirad, and OECD, we have tried to think of what we are calling as Global Alliance for Life Economic Research and Innovation. That is being called as Gallery. And this gallery would take forward the task of getting researchers together throughout the year, do deliberations, and as I said, a large number of small events are planned to bring various facets of high-level principles for life, for sustainable development together. And as I said, 5 different facets, and in the background note you might have seen them at length. We are trying to collate them together. The idea of well-being measurement, which UN Secretary General has declared as his priority for 25, 26 and 26, 27, where indicators for well-being measurement would be introduced. Our idea is that the life should get attention. We are also working very closely with World Bank to bring out the World Development Report's attention on life economy, the blended finance, and the new opportunities that are coming out of these measurements. So I would request Sherpa to launch a gallery. As he presses the button, it would be, it's right there to get that launched. So this is our idea in terms of how we are going to go forward and bring the research consortium of gallery for everyone. And today, from University Connect, we have invited several of our people together and have, in a way, tried to connect University Connect with our idea of university research departments, think tanks, and international agencies coming together to take this forward. India's G20 presidency may end on 30th November, but a new beginning we are making through our research work, and this group that is there in this room would be part of this consortium. We are also extremely excited to get support from ADBI, from IRIA, from UNICEF, from OECD, and of course UNDP. So this effort would bring together all different entities, not only of international institutions, but also Indian universities. I would also be extremely delighted. We have friends from Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, from South Asia. We would very much like to bring them in as part of this consortium and take the research work collectively forward. Now I have great pleasure in inviting somebody who made Indian G20 presidency possible, a grand success, somebody who shaped the narrative and also took that forward through a very, very substantive discussions that have happened across the year. It was he who encouraged us to take the University Connect forward and also brought a lot of life to our work in T20. So a huge applause for Mr. Amitabh Kant. And sir, you have the floor.
Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, Her Excellency Ina Krishnamurthy, the Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to India, MS Isabel Shan, the Resident Representative of UNDP India, Mr. Gopal Krishna Taras, the Visiting Fellow RIS, and many, many distinguished academicians and experts who've joined us here today on this very special day. I'm truly delighted that all of you are here from different parts of the world, different parts of India, joining us today on a Sunday. That really shows the impact of G20 presidency of India in many ways. We've just finished the virtual summit 2-3 days back, and we had a very, very good attendance, even on the virtual summit. We had 22 leaders from across the world who participated in the virtual summit. Now, India's G20 presidency, as our Prime Minister had asked us, his vision was that when we took over the presidency, we were in the midst of very troubled times. The post-COVID era had seen a vast segment of population, almost 200 million people, go below the poverty line. 100 million people had lost their jobs. We've seen the SDG, instead of progressing, had regressed. There was a challenge of slowing down of global growth. Almost 1/3 of the world was in recession. Germany has gone into technical recession, and 75 countries of the world are facing a global debt crisis. There was also the challenge of climate action and climate finance. And we had a major challenge of geopolitical crisis, which had continued on in Europe for over a year and a half, impacting food, fuel, and fertilizer. The United Nations has become an unwieldy body. The basic premise on which it was founded, that the Security Council will find geopolitical solutions, is not feasible because one of the P5 members is in a confrontation for a long time. And therefore, in the midst of all this, our Prime Minister gave us the task that India's presidency should be inclusive, it should be decisive, it should be ambitious, and it should be action-oriented. For over a year, we worked hard, taking over from where Indonesia had left, and our objective was that we must try and bring everybody together. We must bring consensus on the table on all developmental issues. And our priorities were that we must drive strong, inclusive, sustainable growth. We must accelerate the pace of sustainable development goals. We must push ambition on climate action and ensure that we move from billions to trillions as far as finance is concerned. We must have a green development agenda, and for both SDG and green development agenda and implementation of climate action, you need a reform and restructuring and a realignment of the multilateral financial architecture and the multilateral development banks, because these institutions were formed, conceptualized, and instituted in the Bretton Woods period, in the post-World War II period, when there was no crisis of either climate action or there was no challenge of accelerating sustainable development goals. And that became one of our key priorities, that reforms of the multilateral development banks, and we drove that. We also had our priorities on technological development and the digital public infrastructure, because our own experience in India showed that identity, ensuring identity to individuals, ensuring that we are able to provide bank accounts, and between 2015 and 2017, we opened close to 500 million bank accounts. We linked them up with identity. And now we do about 11x more fast payments than what USA and Europe do. We do 4x more than China. From identity to bank accounts to fast payments, we moved to cashless and paperless credit through a series of our startups, and then we moved to wealth creation into Tier 2, Tier 3, rural areas where many of our young startups like Zerodha grow upstart are today able to take stock markets and wealth creation to the rural areas of India. And from there we move to ensuring that we are able to provide insurance to our citizens on the go, on the mobile, in 30 seconds flat, which when I was growing up and I was a young officer would take about 6 to 7 months. So what we've done is that during the COVID period, we used digital public infrastructure to put money into the bank accounts of about 800 million people without any leakage. And today, in over 700 schemes of the government, we put money into the bank accounts of our beneficiaries. And lastly, our priority was that we drove, which to our mind was very important, and the Prime Minister's priority was women-led development, because his belief was that you cannot drive inclusive and sustainable growth without 50% of the global population. And you need to focus on improving their learning outcomes, their health outcomes, bring in women empowerment and gender equality, and that became our priority. At the end of September 10th, by the time we had finished our G20 presidency, when the leaders came to Delhi, the New Delhi Leaders Declaration, where we had 83 paras, we had 87 outcomes, and we had 118 annex documents. It is a total of 205 outcomes and annex documents. We had full consensus on all of them. We had no reservation, no footnote. We had and we were able to bring developed countries, emerging markets, G7, Russia, China, all on board on all these key and critical issues, which in the coming years would help us to accelerate the pace of inclusive and sustainable growth. But one of the key things India did was that if you read the New Delhi Leaders Declaration, it is a living document of the voice of the global South. It speaks the language of developing countries. And by including African Union as a permanent member in New Delhi, India ensured that we are able to bring almost 90% of the global GDP as a part of G20 and make G20 a more powerful forum than the United Nations and the UN Security Council. And to our mind, one of the most path-breaking things was our ability to bring the global south together, which was important because if you look at this year, 80% of the global growth is coming from emerging markets. According to IMF, in the next 2 decades, 2/3 of the global growth will come from emerging markets. 6 of the fastest 12 countries in the world are from Africa. And therefore, the sheer fact that these countries have young demographics, whereas the population in the rest of the world is aging, you will see acceleration of pace in these countries. But the international financial architecture is totally weighed against them. It's weighed against them because inflation and raising of interest rates in the developed part of the world is leading to flow of resources from developing countries to the developed world rather than resources flowing from the developed world to the developing countries. And therefore, one of our key objectives was to have an expert group which was led by Larry Summers and N.K. Singh, which has advocated very strong reforms in the world multilateral development banks and clarified and clearly laid down the requirement of resources for both climate action and SDGs. And therefore, that will be key for us to drive during the presidency of both Brazil and South Africa. This is important because for the first time, the G20 has been led by 4 emerging markets: Indonesia, India, Brazil, South Africa. And we could achieve success in Delhi, and particularly on the geopolitical paragraph, we could achieve success because we worked with Indonesia, we worked with Brazil, we worked with South Africa. And this consensus was feasible because emerging markets worked together to speak the language of the global south. But what is important is that we were able to drive the green development agenda, which covers a vast range of challenges which are confronting the world. We laid down a clear roadmap that the world has to triple its renewable energy by 2030. It must double its energy efficiency by 2030. It must work on biofuels and therefore a biofuel alliance, and laying down the principles of green hydrogen and laying down the principles of the high-level principles of lifestyle for environment, and also focusing on circular economy, on ending plastic pollution, and also laying emphasis on cleaning up our oceans. There are many, many aspects of Green Development Pact, but for the first time in the history of the world, the leaders of economies which control almost 90%, 85 to 90% of the global GDP came together to drive the green development agenda. The challenge is that if you look at the total carbon space available, almost 88% of the carbon space has been occupied by the developed world when it was industrializing. And there's very little carbon space available for emerging markets when they are advancing towards industrializing. To give you a specific example of a country like India, India at a 1.5 degree net 1.5 degree level is today occupying just about 1.3% of the carbon space, whereas logically on a population per capita basis, it should be occupying close to 17.5% of the carbon space. But irrespective of that, our Prime Minister has laid down the vision and said that India must do 500 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030, and we are driving this we have already done about 185 gigawatt of renewable energy. We have pushed the extent of green hydrogen. We worked very hard towards the green hydrogen mission, and we said that we will use renewable energy to crack water and produce green hydrogen. We will not go through gray hydrogen or blue hydrogen, but go all out to produce green hydrogen. The challenge today is that if we are all committed to what we had committed to at COP21 in Paris, but the developed world is today, India is the only country in the world which has achieved what it had committed to at COP21, its NDC target, 9 years ahead of schedule. It is the only G20 country which is in the top 10 of the climate index. But the developed world today is doing a 40% overshoot on emissions. A 40% overshoot on emissions from what it had committed to at COP21 in Paris. So if you were to look at US, EU and Russia together, they are doing a 40% overshoot. And with a 40% overshoot, they are occupying the very limited space that is available even for the developing countries and the emerging markets. And therefore, there's very little scope left for emerging markets. And therefore, I've been a long-term believer that there are several radical things which need to be done, and one of which is the LiFE principles, and that is lifestyle for environment. Now, when Prime Minister laid down the principle of lifestyle for environment at Glasgow Summit, he was talking basically about behavioral change. He was talking about what Richard Thaler said about the nudge theory and won the Nobel Prize for. He was saying that all of us, particularly the Western world, needs to change its behavior. It's not countries which will make a difference. It will not government which will make a difference. If you want to make a difference to climate action, it's nudge individual behavior and human beings towards it. Governments will come and go, politicians will win and lose election, they will fail. But the fundamental change must come from human beings. And unless and until you are not able to create a movement at the basic human level, you will not be able to bring changes. What he was saying is that you nudge human beings into adopting pro-planet life and pro-planet behavior. And by doing this, the International Energy Authority, which did a detailed study on this, said you will be able to save 21% of the greenhouse gas emission. 21% of the greenhouse emission, you will be saving $440 billion and almost 8 to 10% of the fuel consumption by 2030. And therefore, what the IEA study establishes is that you can lay down any targets at COP21, you can lay down anything, you are still seeing a 40% overshoot because we have not changed individual behavior. And behavioral change is the crux. And there is no economics, there cannot be sound economists who will keep laying down macroeconomic models without changing human behavior. And therefore, human behavior must be changed. And human behavioral change would also lead to change in the basic paradigm of how we manufacture, how we do urban design, and how we grow and expand, and how we manufacture. Because when America and Europe were urbanizing, they made cities where their car companies bought over the railway companies and destroyed them. So Ford and General Motors actually bought over the railway companies. They made cities for cars and not for people. And therefore, you have, in the United States, you have 1,100 cars per 1,000 people. In Europe, you have 950 cars per 1,000 people. In India, we only have 28 cars per 1,000 people. Now, if we are able to move towards a completely new model of mass transit by electric buses rather than by cars, if we are able to create cities for cycling and walking, because in India, in the next 5 decades, you will do 500 million people will come into the process of urbanization. India will create 2 Americas. You cannot repeat the mistake which Europe and America have already made. If we follow their model of urbanization, there will be nothing left. There's no question of 1.5. According to the United Nations, we are all heading for in 2050, we are heading for 2.9 degrees centigrade, not 1.5 degrees centigrade. And therefore, you have to reverse the entire process. It's like all the arteries are already blocked. And how do you reverse it to enable blood flow to take place? And therefore, all emerging markets, irrespective of the fact that the developed world has already occupied their carbon space, have to industrialize without carbonizing the world. And therefore, this requires both technology and long-term finance. This requires the World Bank, which raises only 0.6 cents to a dollar from private sector, to raise 10x of that money to provide blended finance, first loss guarantees, credit enhancement. And therefore, it must become a climate bank more than anything else. And so should Asian Development Bank, which has started doing this, and many other regional banks, to ensure that when the Earth may survive, we'll all, as human beings, go extinct if we are not able to live up to it. And therefore, the principles, the high-level principles of LiFE, lay down these principles on how the world must proceed in terms of urbanization, in terms of transportation, in terms of mobility, in terms of circular economy. All these are critical because circular economy cannot be done by mandates. It's a design principle. It must be extended producer's responsibility. It must be that every output must be an input into some other product, and that's a huge process of design. But all of us need to work towards it. And therefore, it needs new economists, it needs a new thinking, it needs a new mindset, it needs a completely new vision, it needs a new development paradigm, which only all of you can provide. All the intellectuals who've gathered here today and will be sitting here for the next 3 days must lay down a clear new developmental paradigm based on the LiFE. And that is why we've assembled here today. So, ladies and gentlemen, there's a huge global challenge. There's a challenge of human extinction. There's a challenge of none of the emerging markets being able to move forward. There's a challenge of regression rather than progress. And only all of you, great thinkers who've assembled here today, can lay down what the world must do, what each of us must do to enable us to grow and progress in a highly sustainable manner, keeping the LiFE principles in mind. And as LiFE principles, by implementing them on ground. And what needs to be done to implement on ground? We cannot be just academicians. We need to ensure that this becomes the dominant principles, this becomes the dominant ideology, this becomes the guiding stone for future development of the world. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mr. Sherpa, for guiding us motivating us and telling us for next 3 days what hefty agenda we have in terms of addressing and taking it forward. You very rightly emphasized on Global South and our approach on Global South's engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, you would be glad to know Prime Minister hosted the second Voice of Global South Summit few days back, and a new center has already been inaugurated as part of this endeavor that PM had announced on 12th and 13th of January. This is the Global South Center of Excellence. I'm extremely delighted to mention it to you that this center is being hosted at RIS, and Prime Minister has launched it last week. This is something which is absolutely exciting for us, and we are going to take forward what Sherpa just now mentioned, India's accomplishments in the realm of digital solutions, scaling them up and reducing the transaction cost, bringing in predictability and precision in terms of solutions. Let me have now the pleasure of inviting my colleague, Mr. Gopal Krishnan Tadas, for proposing vote of thanks. Mr. Tadas.
Thank you, Dr. Sachinji. We indeed had the privilege of listening to the addresses by dignitaries present on the dais here. They have touched upon various facets of life economy, sustainability, sustainable development. I would say that in RIS, we have been working on the issues of sustainability, social sector, in financial inclusion, and various interrelated aspects. In fact, RIS spearheaded 2 task forces under T20, as Dr. Sachinji was mentioning, one on the life economy, second on the sustainable development goals, how to accelerate progress in sustainable development goals. As a part of these think tanks, we had various seminars organized, both as a part of T20 as also outside at the RIS level. And we have also come out with various insightful papers, and some of them are part of the book which we just released now. We are indeed thankful to all the contributors to this book. In fact, as Dr. Sachinji was mentioning, we had been planning to host this global summit on life economy since the time high-level principles were adopted by G20 summit development ministers first in June and G20 summit leaders in September. But somehow, because of various reasons, it could not materialize, but we are so happy that we are now able to do that under the auspices of the presence of Indian Sherpa here. Thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful address. This summit would not have been possible without the support of Ministry of External Affairs, G20 Secretariat within the Ministry of External Affairs, and Ministry of Environment and Forests, and also the Indonesian government, who are co-host to this summit. Indeed, madam, we are thankful to you. As you know, we just launched the global platform for undertaking research and innovation on life economy. Various partners who are the founding members are present here. Federico from OECD, Isabel, of course, from UNDP, and then Impact Hub representatives are here, Daniel from GIZ, and we have Hirad, who has been instrumental in taking various initiatives on the life economy from the 4-sector group, is also around us. Thank you, Ms. Isabel, for your address. We have a lot to do in collaboration with the UNDP going forward. I think I would not take much time and then come in the way of the last event. Now, Dr. Sachinji, I would say, that has been a driving force behind all this. Without his support, it would not have been possible. We have been, getting a lot of guidance from him, and he is such a force that if we say we want to do something which is useful for not only India but for the global society, global economy. He says, no, let us do it. So there is a lot of support from Dr. Sachinji. One or two announcements in the interest of coordination. Of course, so many people, I would say that, this summit has been organized within a very short notice of 1 month. A global summit being organized within short notice of 1 month, and so many dignitaries across the world are present here. Thank you all so much for being present today. Tomorrow onwards, we are having our deliberations in Vigyan Bhavan. Tomorrow and day after, it will be there. And the same batches which have been given today will work there also. Thank you all, and I request all of you to join for dinner.